Okay, so great to see you again. It's great to meet you yesterday. We're very happy to see your happy faces again today. We'll do a little bit of a recap this morning, and then another exercise to move us on with planning and the group work. And then also, by the end of the day, start thinking about ways of activating or materializing the work as well. But you won't be doing any of that until like tomorrow, really, or this afternoon even, once you go your ways out of this room. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you guys got up to yesterday afternoon, how you managed yourselves, where did you go? Does anyone want to say a little bit about what they did? And whilst we do, I don't know, hear a few stories there, start thinking about, we'll go around all the groups again just to remind each other of where your statements are at. Yeah, so when we met you at 5:30 on the Google call, what had you been doing from 1:30 to 5:30? How did you get yourselves into that meeting and your statements? And did you just, well, you tell me, give me some examples of what you were doing. Anyone? Volunteers? Do you guys want to say something? See, it's partly to give the mic to someone else.
Yeah, so initially, like before 1:30, we were trying to find common grounds where we could all work together, and we realized that a lot of it had to do with stakeholders who are learners or educators in some sense. We have 2 teachers here, so they have a lot of expertise in that area. And when we are thinking about what we wanted to do, something along the lines of learning, teaching again. Yeah, so we couldn't figure out if we wanted to focus on the learner part of it or the teacher part of it, the educator part of it. So we had a lot of back and forth on that. We're still yet to discuss if we have any more potential ideas in that direction. We wanted to sleep over it and then discuss today.
So you obviously listened to Liam's advice to sleep on it. That was good. So that's one activity. You slept. So apart from just, reviewing some conclusions or questions that you might have had together, what did you actually do together to reflect on those things after you left this room? So in the room we had you working with bits of paper, getting to know each other. It's not a trick question.
No. Initially, what we were trying to do was we were first trying to figure out the who, where, and what, and then the problem statement. But then we were unsure if we should do it that way or should it be from problem statement to the context of it. So we're still not sure. We've done it the way, like first we've established who, where, what, and then we've found the.
Okay. And I'm going to imagine a scenario. You had no idea what you were doing. You left this room and you were just like, what did we just do there? Didn't like it or didn't understand it. They didn't use a mic. What did you do? Pretend there's nothing on that paper. What did you literally do?
Yeah, initially we were not thinking about this. We went out for lunch and we were just talking about our interests in general. And then we started off with our comment.
Okay, thanks.
And then we argued.
And then you argued.
Great.
We argued. And then we discussed.
So
we went back and forth.
Yeah. Okay, so you slept, you ate, you had dialogue, and you built relationships. You formulated ideas. So that's just a really important part of why you're here. So you don't need to answer a question. You don't need to agree with us necessarily. So we're just thinking about the way we ended the call yesterday a little bit as well, thinking about this in terms of professional development, ways of being in the world. There's this word right beside me there, transcending or transcend the boundaries. So, yeah, we're trying to think about how we might transcend things, perhaps, problems, yeah, but also maybe the things we take for granted, the things we just reproduce, perpetuate. Sometimes we're part of the problem. It's hard to remove oneself from that because there's a lot of emotion or politics or desire for change. Maybe when you have more education or more skills, sometimes the skill is in knowing when not to do something, but just have lunch with somebody and build a relationship. So that aside, that's just a normal life lesson, but it's also actually about thinking critically, or what we might, there's a word, reflexivity in academia. Some of you might have heard. Simple version, we think we're trained to be objective about the world, but actually you have to take a bit of a second step back from that and go, oh, wow, well, why am I seeing it in that way? So a lot of this is about, why are we seeing the world in a particular way? Why are we seeing a problem in a particular way? Why are we seeing a solution maybe more problematically in a particular way? So, yeah, anyway, I was just interested to know what you might have done, that you weren't just like being left to the tigers or the monkeys. I've seen monkeys, not seen any tigers yet. So any other groups? What would like to hear about other everyday things you might have done in the last afternoon to build a bit of solidarity, to build a bit of shared dialogue? Any group want to talk about something they did? Before I stare at somebody. Yeah.
So I come from a tech background. It's been a few months now in the field of design. So these two people, they are all in the field of design. They've been here. So there was a lot of back and forth of how the perspectives are different in these both fields, or how I have a certain process that I bring to the table, and how it's different, or how we appreciate each other's outlook and perspective towards a particular problem.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. That's a nice summary. And in a sense, that's really about the whole 4 days. What are you all bringing to something to be able to work together, to be able to plan together, and how that might reflect other ways you might, do things beyond this room. So anyway, so was there any other comments about, I don't know, going shopping or sweeping the campus?
So I felt, I don't know, I have not much interacted with others. Ours was a very diverse group. One was doing PhD in an environment, basically related to water. The other was a management student, and the other person is having some, background of designing, because she was a design student in DTI, and also she is a tech person. And I'm coming from a background of health. So to coming to a consensus, basically, was a very tough for us, but however we tried to zero it down, and I could find a lot of different perspectives which were pulling in here. However, still we could zero down to one thing. Somewhere I felt like, uh, the concept of multidisciplinary approach, we miss out that. So for me it was a learning that we have to sit down, we need to have that patience to understand the others' perspectives and from the backgrounds they are coming, to a point. So I felt this was my learning from this type of interaction yesterday.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, like I pointed to that word transcend there earlier, and there's another, I'll come to you in a minute. The multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, again, academic jargon, but in an everyday sense, it's partly what you've just described, how multiple skills and perspectives are required for any deeper understanding of the situation, but also sometimes it's necessary to transcend those boundaries of inclusion, exclusion, or assumptions, bias. So that's what you're what we're trying to reinforce is that's what you're doing together. That is the key project.
Hi, good morning. So we had a debate over food, and we guys were having food, but at the same time, two groups were sitting together, and we were discussing about sexual abuse. We were discussing about college students. We were discussing about mental health of students, physical health, how physical health and mental health are interconnected. We were discussing about postpartum depression and a lot of issues that are very relevant. But what was the crux of the whole discussion was about making decisions in situations based on your animalistic instincts and your humanistic instincts, and how because of evolvement at certain spots or certain situations we should try to suppress our animalistic instincts to get suppressed, or be emotionally vulnerable in that situation, but rather evolve and take more practical and intellectual decision, even emotionally intellectual decision in those social scenarios. So,
Great, thank you. I mean, you're talking there also about how through the dialogue you had, there was, singular issue also became intersected with other issues. Then human embodied experience it can be a challenge when there's that meeting of more than one person. Yeah, and how do we separate things like emotion and instinct, if that's the right way to describe it, and I guess ways of projecting our identity as a way of empathizing with someone else can be hard. Lunch and dialogue and conversations is an important part of transcending those things as well. But also reminds me of what Chari was reminding us at the end of the conversation yesterday online about the role of culture. And like as social beings, with intellect, with capacity to evolve many, many different ways of communication, culture is a very important valve in that it changes over time, of course, as well. But culture is something we've created, evolved, that used as an adaptive kind of strength that we have to be maybe better, safer, happier in the world. So culture's a big part, whether in a little group or thinking about how we can work together in the world. And so in the name of sort of reflecting on your statements, which you shared with us a version of last night, and we're not going to repeat that just now, I just wanted to come at it from this sort of more transversal way, sideways, as in, what is it? Who are you in all of this? What are you doing together? That's the process, that's the experience, there's no, it's not mandated that you come up with the best social or just project and that you have to have a perfect presentation at the end. So similarly, by the end of today, we also want, and for the afternoon, you'll be thinking about the skills you all bring to your group and how those skills can be sort of threaded together and responsibilities and tasks, if you like, sort of emerge for your group to be able to start prototyping and designing the project through the rest tomorrow. Do you want me to say any more? Are you good to go?
Almost. Okay, so I just thought I'd do a short recap of what we did yesterday, just in terms of starting to engage in a process of co-designing a co-design project. So the outcome of this workshop will, in effect, be designing a project. So you won't be solving the problem, because it's only 4 days. Yeah? But you will potentially get to the point where you have a really clearly defined project plan for a co-design project around the topic that you've chosen, or the issue you've chosen. So today I just wanted to do a bit of recap of the way in which the Venn diagram works, so that you can start to gain a little bit more clarity today. The slide I'm going to show you is sort of a revised version of that little diagram there, and I'll talk through the different intersections and how you can start to clarify these intersections today. In terms of thinking about the activities that co-design might require in order to flesh out the plan for a project, to design a project. The thing about co-design is often, or co-design processes, or participatory design processes, or in-community processes, is that it often reveals many projects for design. So it's sort of a meta-level design project. It's a way of defining what the needs are, what problems there are, what opportunities there are, that become other projects for maybe other designers or other people to work on. Yeah. So it is co-design is often at a level above the thing, at a level above the technological solution or the communication solution. Okay, so the logic in the title of the show about this idea of things being situational and relational is really important for co-design. So all design happens somewhere in the world. It's for something in the world. Yeah? It's in relationship to people and place in the world. So today I really want you to think about that. Like, what are the situations and what are the relations that the project might need to engage with in order to find opportunities for better outcome, or to solve the problem, or to make an impact on the problem. Now, design is really good at developing methods for this, and those of you who have worked in service design roles, or have done things like personas or scenarios and so on, these are tools for abstracting and having a way to sort of start to understand what these situations or relationships might be. Often they're from a distance. Yeah? They're not on the ground with the people. In community-based work or deep organisational-based design work, it is on the ground. It is with people. Yeah? And that's quite different, because you have to negotiate and make relationships and make friends and find allies and work out who doesn't want to do any work with you and so on. So the Venn diagram sort of asked you a series of questions, which was about where, where is this located? What's the context? Or contexts, because some problems have many contexts, the home, the workplace, the hospital, the street. So mapping and understanding those contexts in relationship to your concern, your what, it becomes really important. And it's very rare that a design project has a single context. Yeah? Design lives in the world for a long time. Processes live in the world for a long time. They move, they change, and so on. So the what is really around the issues or the concerns you've identified, which I think probably yesterday was most of the focus for you. So what do we want to work on? Yeah. The who are the stakeholders. So in co-design processes, or in design processes, we often think about the user. Yeah. And we have terminologies and discourses around things like user-centered design or human-centered design. Now, the user of a thing that's designed is just the end. It's a tiny part of design. There's the producers, the supply chain, the distributors, the technical support. There's all of these other things that sit behind an outcome. They're also stakeholders in a process. So the who in this situation might include users, people who are related to the users or have some relationship or interactions with them, organisations that might support or regulate the situation that you're looking at or the concern you're looking at, and so on. So the who becomes a very big thing. And you need to work out who's who. Who is it that you really want to or can engage or is really relevant to the project? Now, the intersections is where the situational and relational become really important. So I've just sort of tried to make a very quick thing without sort of confusing your individual group projects too much, but you can define these things today. But one of the intersections is this one around who is where, or who is where and when, in a situation. Situations are very rarely static. People move in and out of them at different times. And the time dimension or the temporal dimension of design projects is really significant. And that's going to be a big focus of the River of Life project that James will facilitate today, understanding how these things might play out over time, or what the history of these things are that have produced the problem in order to the present, in order to understand the future. The intersection between the who and the what is really, what does this really mean for who? Yeah, and are our assumptions of impact or problem or opportunity correct? Are they real, or are they imagined, or are they assumed? And how do we understand? How do we test that? Yeah, what do we have to do to test that? The intersection between the what and the where is what really happens where. Yeah. So again, it's about testing our assumptions of things. Yeah, lots of things happen. Like I'm in Delhi for the first time in many, many years. I have all sorts of assumptions about what is actually really happening where, and all of them are wrong. Yeah? I have no idea what's happening. For me to find out what's really happening, I'd have to be here for a long, long time, and I'd have to really talk to people, and I'd have to sit with people, and I'd have to observe people, and so on and so on. So these are the activities of co-design, these intersections. That's the work that co-design does in order to really test these questions of purpose or the questions of why, in order to frame a project that actually will bring impact. Now, one of the other beautiful things about co-design processes or participatory processes or community-based design work is just the very act of doing this is changing the situation. So the very act of talking with people, of sitting with people, of bringing people together is in part the solution or the impact that is being made on the problem without necessarily needing to find a material or technological solution. Yeah? And that might come, there might be many of those things, but it's the process which is the impact. So the process that is designed is the design, if that makes sense. Yeah? So it's all about building relationships. So we'll share this slide with you later, but as you start thinking through your work today, really think about these intersections of your project. Think about what activities or what expertise or what communities, what people might need to be engaged and how you might engage those people. Is it having, what was the conversation? You all argued and then you had lunch. Is it about having lunch with people? Is it about drawing with people? Is it about walking with people and listening to people? Yeah. So there might be many different things that might seem not terribly immediately productive in a design sense or in a professional sense, but they're possibly the most productive things. So design in a co-design process takes on a very different kind of nature. It's a highly social kind of process. So I'm going to leave that there and we're going to move into this River of Life thing. But are there any questions about this? I'm presuming many of you kind of nutted out your intersections and sort of came to something similar. Is that fair? I mean, the thing I haven't talked about here, which is what James was sort of introducing, is that in amongst all of this, there's also you. Yeah. So there's your positions, your relationships with each other. So as much as the project is about a thing, the process of co-design is also about the people engaged in the process of co-design. So there's all of your biases and all of your relationships and where you meet and what really happens, within that thing. Yeah, you're definitely one of the who's. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to, and I think this is one of the really tricky things with all design processes. The positionality of the designer is present in design all the time. And as much as we might like to be objective and have some sort of clearly evidenced, clear answer, it's very tricky. So it's better off just to acknowledge that and to be upfront with that. So as the day goes on, I'm going to keep on doing these diagrams for you to help gain some clarity. And I'm going to mainly communicate through these diagrammatic methods, so not lots of text and information. And hopefully over the course of today, you'll start to get much greater clarity about your project. I think the really important thing about a diagram like this or a Venn diagram is it is static. It's frozen in time. And it treats everything as if it's flat and at the same time, which of course is not how the world works. So today is really about how this becomes something that exists over time. Yeah. So what the path is and what the path dependencies might be. Yeah. And who comes into what conversation or what activity at what point and why. Yeah. And from that we'll start to co-design a co-design project in relationship to your concern. Yep. Great. I'll leave that there for you so you can mull over it on my computer. And James will.
Okay. On that last point, about the flatness of the visual, language, whatever kind of language we use, whether it's visual or textual or oral, I don't know how many languages there are in this room, but more than I can speak. And, that's part of the unflattening of a situation is also understanding that there are these different sort of ways of communicating that we have. This will be emphasizing the visual as well, but in hopefully a more...
Where did this go? Where it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I just pressed something.
Oh yeah. So, the relational, the reason the word relational is there is to help unflatten this idea of the situational. And in terms of human activity over time, in co-design, there has been this sort of emerging sort of language of relational design. So not coming in with one size fits all, not coming in as the expert, but having those conversations. And a big part of that is because the experts are the people in the room, not necessarily the designer at all, or the researcher, or the expert. Sometimes people are just brought in as experts of what, I don't know. And, my own background's in anthropology, very problematic discipline, going in and describing people and often the people not having any voice in that representation. The reason I went into anthropology is because I was one of those people who was studied. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I want to tell my own story. So how you come together to collaborate, to tell a story about a situation is really complex. And in terms of the relational and in the context of place-based or native or indigenous or community kind of identities and realities, there's a big other word in all of that, which is ethics. And the reason relational thinking has evolved a little bit in terms of institutions and politicians and politics of all that is of course in relation to ethics and how things may or may not go well. And key to that is relationships as well. So there's also sort of there's a bit of a sort of 3 R's. You know how there's 3 R's? I don't know if you got that in, if you've ever heard of the 3 R's of primary school in the UK, which is, it's a bit of a joke because they don't all begin with R. They just sound like they do: reading, writing, and arithmetic. So numbers and reading and literacy. So the 3 R's of community-based and Indigenous kind of oriented research are, there's more than 3 R's actually. There's about 5 or 7 depending on the framework you look at, but the 3 core ones are respect, relationships, and reciprocity. Like, what is a community actually getting? What are the collaborators actually getting out of this? And not you just, or not me just telling you that you're learning something. So that's something that we need to also reflect on when we're in a room and work with a dynamic and get to know people. Anyway, so in relation to situations and relationships and ethics and responsibility, and you could think of lots of R's, I guess. Time and space, or we might call it history, is really important. So Liam already mentioned temporality. We've mentioned culture, and we've mentioned individual communities situated kind of knowledge. And all of these are their own systems of being in the world. We might get, imagine, actually just use your imagination. Can you all see this piece of paper? Maybe just stand up, or just, in fact, I'm going to get you to exercise. If you're not at the front here, just if you can all come to the boundary or come into the circle. So we feel like a community, Rikela, together, in my language. So what we're going to look at is this way of thinking or rethinking your project, its situation and its relationships, and thinking of it in a sort of time-based way. So like the history of a situation and the history of how that situation might not be flat, but actually full of many dynamics and change over time. And this, if you had 4 or 5 of these, this is the Ganges, or the River Hamara in my village, or who's got a river? Who grew up in a river or near a river? Well, there's another story. You had one?
Limited interaction, but you lived in Delhi, you lived next to it.
Yeah, everyone has. I mean, wherever their humans are, there's invariably a relationship with a water source, of course, often a river. So what can you tell me about a river? Are they pink? Well, if a river isn't pink, maybe it just depends on your perception. But
Changing?
yeah, rivers are always on the move. They flow. What did you say?
Yeah, flow.
Yeah, they flow. Reflect. Great. Fluidity. Yeah. What else?
The movement is different.
Move continuously, so they're not fixed in time.
Dynamic.
Dynamic and what was it?
Movement is different at different places.
Yeah, in different sections, and there's environmental conditions.
Meandering. Men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. The river.
Yeah. Yes, very good. There was some
Meandering.
meandering. Yeah, yeah. It's not straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Rivers have their own characteristics. They have their own color, their own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Each river is unique.
Big.
Vastness, depth.
Yep.
Portability.
Their source.
That's a good one. Where are we? Who said that? Did you say that? They have a source, yeah. And where do they go? Velocity, they have speed, yeah. They have all sorts of characteristics, all sorts of dynamics, vectors, whatever scientific or mechanical language we want to use. But yeah, it's not so obvious where they end, or we take for granted where they end. But a river never ends if it goes into the ocean.
The end is ocean for the river.
And
Circularity.
yeah,
It moves in circle.
in a very general sense, yeah, we recycle the water all the time. But also we do other things, like what do beavers do? Not only beavers put a dam in a river, do they? And damming a river is not necessarily a destructive thing, is it? Or not a negative thing. It can be used to control conditions or enhance other conditions. Using the force of it, yeah. For energy, you mean? Yes. Yeah. Or to create safe spaces to fish. Like you have weirs in rivers as well, which are like mini dams. Okay, so we have a source, we have other factors, vectors, facets. I mean, I love the thing about, the color, reflection. There's different ways of seeing a river. That's, there's I guess a science to that, a physics to it with our body, but there's also the social and cultural ways of using, particularly in this region, we know, well, we're learning, but you know probably more deeply, very important ways to use the river here. So what we're going to do is that each of you're going to, in groups, get, I think 4 is probably enough. You might even be okay with 3. It's more of a case of space. You're gonna you need to find 8 spots in the room. Start with maybe 3 as a group. If you can get a 4th one in, great. And you don't need to. We'll keep iterating with the river. So we'll just start with a source. Don't worry about if it's going to be if you're at the source of a river, can you see the end? No. And likewise, if you're further downstream, can you see the source? Often not. So that's the main metaphor for co-design here and for project planning. Do we always see the source? What's the assumptions we're making? Do we know what the downstream effects are? What have been the intervening or conditional the environmental conditions prior to where you are and after where you are? I mean, these are just to push the metaphor further unfathomable when it gets to the sort of oceanic nature of it. Because of course the ocean, there's another thing to think about. The ocean, we're all just on one big island or archipelago, in an ocean together. So things are very connected. So start with, we'll do it in stages. So get your 3 sheets. Just focus on one of them initially as a source. It maybe we'll have more than 3 or etc. after that, but we'll do it. Just take your time, have a conversation, think about how you're going to draw, imagine, diagram, conceptualize the source. And then we can get groups to sort of respond to every source. And so Liam and I are not going to be your teachers as such. Going to encourage you to do peer learning with this. I mean, we're there to comment. I mean, you've probably heard us already, we'll comment. But yeah, we'll just focus on that source. And then once that might take 40 odd minutes. And then you'll finish the task. And 2, 3, whatever you feel is the right way to go. But that's all I need to say just now. I can say more about how you will we'll talk a little bit more how you might imagine the downstream afterwards, or somebody might be sent to. You might break your group up and go to the downstream, and some start further up, and you've got to figure out how you come together as well. Okay, so have a deep breath and get your 3 bits of paper. In fact, just get 1 bit of paper just now. That'd be the easiest thing. Get your source paper, find your corner as a group, and start. I'll give you 10 minutes just now to figure out how you might source your source. And then we'll go around. And then after that, we'll give you another 10 minutes to finish the source. And then we'll get everyone to comment or like have a discussion, reflect on, just so that you start to articulate. Because one of the important things about doing anything is, you know, the lunch, the dialogue, hearing, like saying things out loud to each other is a really important process in terms of just disentangling thoughts, understanding clarity or lack thereof. So that'll probably take us in total, I reckon, about 40 minutes. And then you can crack on with imagining your fuller ecosystem. Okay, so groups, 1 piece of paper, find a spot. So from what I can gather, I can hear, I can see, you've been getting back into the ideas of your project, which is awesome. Okay, so you've got 1 bit of paper, you've been sort of practicing, ideating a bit, creating some, I don't know, mind map kind of scenario. The idea of just starting with 1 piece of paper and practicing a source is also to just help calibrate for this. So either with the same piece of paper or the flip side of it, spend the next sort of little bit of while you starting to sort of do this sort of practice version, prototype, if you like, of your river. This video is quite helpful.
So the river of life is really a critical tool, I believe. It's so useful as a clinical psychologist. I've used it in my practice with individuals, but to use it in the model CPR really helps tribes and researchers look together at where they're going and where they've been. And it's really
You see how there's a timeline? I mean, that's a metrics-oriented one, but
as Native people, we think kinesthetically. We've got to be involved. We've got to see. I've got to.
She must be an Indigenous U.S.
So the river
citizen.
of life really adds to that, and it adds to the relationship of us and the researcher to look at where we're going and where we've been, and it's prophetic in essence for us to say, okay, but this is maybe where we want to go. We're not sure if that's where we're going to end up, and that's the beauty of the river of life in CPR, because the river may take a turn that the researcher or the community may not be aware of, but that's the needed turn.
So that's a pretty useful representation of what it could look like. But yeah, so that was an Indigenous Native American researcher. So that's a happy coincidence. So you can. It actually originates from Indigenous Americas as a practice of community collaboration in relation to, I guess, outside forces. Partly to center community voices, prioritize community interests, but also as a visual vernacular, basically, as a visual mode of communication and understanding, which is not about limiting research, it's also about getting everyone else to think a little bit differently, to put ourselves, that reflexivity I talked about earlier, or even the transcending boundaries there. So yeah, think about ways, so spend the next little while, so what's been good about the mind mapping, etc., that you've been doing, or actually these guys, if you want to go and have a wee look, those guys actually started into the river metaphor more visually already. Yeah, so you've been able to reconnect with your group, with your where your statement got to yesterday. You've done your mind maps, you've reconceptualized, reinforced perhaps, or maybe deconstructed. But now think of that a little bit differently in terms of the source, what the source might be. So also, and that's about visualizing it, yes, creating a situation whereby, relationships become more apparent. And those relationships are actually the intersections we've talked about before. You can make a mess with this because after the 20 minutes from now, whatever, then you're going to just start again with and give each other tasks for the rest of the river. So perhaps it is that it's 4 sheets and looks like it's winding, and you're doing different sections of the river each, and then you can swap sections to add or edit what other people have been suggesting. But anyway, we'll worry about that when we start that section. Okay, so you're going to do your source again. It's going to be a visual language. You can label things, of course, your keywords, or even things that might all of a sudden appear to you from the visual. Yeah.
So when we are showing the river flowing, we're going from the source to further down the river.
At the minute, you're just situating the source.
In the river.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what is the source of the river?
But aren't we also planning ahead?
Yes.
That's next.
But that's next.
Not yet.
Not yet. No. So at the minute, you're just redoing the source paper. And then, so this is your second iteration of it now. You've done a first mind mapping, ideating. Now you're just pushing that ideation iteratively, doing it again. And it's just to establish more of an agreement, more of a conceptual understanding together of what the ground conditions are. Now, it's not about knowing everything, and you can go back to the source as is informed by where you might end up later if you want to keep changing it. But at the minute, just focus on that one square. And if we think of it as, and after we finish that, and then you're going to go on to the rest of it, if we think of it in like quadrants or whatever, a triangle, the other, depending how many people's in your group, like if there's 4, maybe you use 4 pieces of paper. If there's 3, use 3. And that will just construct your river. And it can be any shape you want it to be, depending on if you think there's something that relates in the metaphor of a river, such as an obvious one, a bend. Well, what does that represent? Is that something that has slowed everything down? I mean, there's interesting words here if you want to think as well. Like I like making people see where they are and like draw from all the sort of spatial environmental conditions that are so banal and so everyday that they usually tell us something much bigger about the society we live in. Like there's some interesting words here. I'm not sure that we would necessarily agree with the sort of political discourse behind some of them, like about, go faster or be bigger. But the river is a way of inverting some of them as well. So just think laterally as you can, but it's just it's an iteration. Because the Thursday is about Okay, now we have a plan. That's it. You don't have to answer anything or fix anything for Thursday. It's just about having a plan.
Maybe a way of, I'll turn this on again. Maybe a way of sort of looking into the future on this is that at the end of this exercise, you're going to produce something that tells the story about what a co-design project. So a project you haven't done yet, but a project you've designed to do. So it's the story you need to tell to the people that you want to do the project with. Yeah? And all projects are kind of stories. Yeah? They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah? So we're doing the beginning, middle, and end today, or a way of visualizing that. Yeah? So it's a storytelling mechanism. Yeah? Then we have other storytelling mechanisms in design, like the design brief, yeah, or the market analysis, or the different tools for storytelling. Not necessarily tools that are useful for community-oriented co-design. A brief doesn't work in co-design. Yeah? It's anathema to co-design. So we're developing that kind of capability, how to tell that story.
We're going to have another pause. You get your third breath of the day. Your third exercising of the limbs. So come in a little bit closer again. Just think about the other sections of the river on its journey to its destination. Good word. Because it's not the end necessarily. We're always only in the middle of something, the cycle of water. So you could do that by moving together as a group onto a second and a third piece of paper. Or you could distribute tasks separately. It's up to you. If there's still work to do on the source one, or you can all move on together. It's up to you. Trust your own group dynamic. And also the other thing, just think about in terms of preferred futures. Preferred future for us, of course, is you guys getting to Thursday and having a group presentation. You will be choosing a medium for that presentation. Let's broadly imagine it as a publication. And that can, of course, be in digital form. You'll present your project in relation to that. So think about the other thing we want you to do. So when you're going on to those next stages of the river flow, so those dots are moments of change, disruption, a dynamic environment. I think he's got the word
Intersection.
Intersection.
So things where something happens.
Yeah. So we've been talking about with the Venn diagram about using intersections to think about the relationships we need to consider within the situation. And these are continually emerging. So those intersections also become key moments in the project where you have to give special attention to, either for contextualizing so that people are aware of the why and the where kind of thing, or those questions. But there are also moments where you can think about special attention that needs to be given to that in terms of preferred future. So that's also a point where you need to be thinking about the skills in your group or skills not even in your group, but that would be required for that part of the project. So start thinking in those ways as well. Doesn't need to be fixed, doesn't need to be overly determined. You can spend time later in the afternoon today thinking about how that might inform a bit of a project overview that you will be working through tomorrow. And to get to that point, this river, that you'll continue in the various sections, the beginning, middle, and end, so to speak, using that sort of story building, world building kind of scenario to draw out the intersections, which will then lead on to the practice and skills required. So that's very, high level summary. So if you do that now for the next around about an hour, maybe 50 minutes, we'll see how the vibe is. And then we will just debrief, just check where everyone's at. And then, we'll just wrap up at that point. Liam might say a little bit more at that point about the kind of outcomes
Next step.
for that you're working towards. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah. So something I was mentioning to one of the groups earlier this morning. So often in design we think of the solution, or we have this idea of the preferred future. Like what will solve the problem, or what will change the situation. And the problem with that is that we don't really know yet, because we haven't done the work yet to know if we can change the situation. So it's a speculation. But the speculation is really important for design processes, and even for co-design processes, as a sort of goal image. It's like a picture in your head that allows some direction of travel. Whether or not what you achieve has got any resemblance to the goal image doesn't really matter. It's about having something to push towards, a way of projecting. There are lots of different methods that some of you are probably familiar with in relation to this, relationship to this, that can be used within a co-design process. Probably one of the most significant ones is this idea of backcasting and collaborative backcasting, where you actually sit with people and do the sort of exercise that we're doing, like the River of Life, about what the preferred future may be for their situation. And it doesn't necessarily provide all of the detail, but it induces a particular way in which you can understand what the work to do might be. And that's kind of what we're doing here. What is the work that needs to happen, that we can foresee so far? Yeah. Of course, it'll change. Yeah.
The destination.
Yeah. Great.
Cool.
Any questions? No?
So just build out 2 or 3 more pages. It doesn't need to be a straight line. Just could be an expansion of like some crazy part of a river that we're at here, which looks good. So yeah, don't worry which way you want to go.
So everyone bring their maps over here. Most of the people are, there's just a couple. And then sort of assemble around the couches so we can see each other's work. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's really important that you all see each other's work. So we won't spend a lot of time talking about it, because you're all still in the midst of it within your group. But we will do some things. And then as we get towards the end, I'm going to give you an activity that will help you define some activities of co-design within this project. And so that's the activity for this afternoon, along with finishing your river.
Yeah. So great to see good bit of further ideation going on. Coming into one of the ways I describe you could say this about any project, any community, but also it's important for research, if you like. It doesn't matter if you're not finished yet. You don't need to have it finished. You can work on it this afternoon as well. But the project of research or discovery or knowledge is fundamentally a relational project. You're bringing things into relation with each other. That is the practice of discovery, of developing a relationship with knowledge, yes, but also things that we might otherwise call innovation, design, creativity. So it's always about bringing things into relation. And as we've discussed earlier, there's also that positionality. There's the you are part of the who in all of this. So aside from the project you're imagining yourself, this is also, just to repeat, and we will repeat, it's also about how you are coming into relation with these processes. So that's good. So thinking about the projects here, does anyone want, like, how many do we have here? Is that one? And this is another one? Okay, so whose is this one? Yeah, does anyone want to, do you want to just reflect very briefly on a bit of, so if we think a little bit more relationally about that as well, maybe another descriptor word would be direction, as opposed to over-determining a destination or over-determining a kind of outcome. It's a bit like the nuance between purpose and relevance we were mentioned yesterday. Just a brief reflection on the direction of the project.
So this project started as a sort of a small idea that how safe our campuses are in terms of simple cycling through the campus. How safe is it? Because in this campus also there are cycling zones, there are non-cycling zones, and then there is traffic zone, light traffic zones, which is not very much demarcated, and there are situations and cases of accidents. So we try to see that what all places the students feel comfortable in driving, and at different point in times, whether they are in the morning hours where the classes are active, and at the evening when primary spaces of activities are the hostels and the library area. So those were the concerns, that because for the female students, there are some of my colleagues who do not feel comfortable driving at night, riding a bicycle at night. So they prefer walking to the library and other spots. So why so? So we started looking into these things, and our idea started from how people started gathering together as community for education purpose. So starting from religious institution acting as educational institution, to communities as educational institutions, and then to these demarcated built up structures as educational institutions. So we started to see this. So if there's a small illustration which talks about Nalanda, which is one of the oldest university in Asian region. So if you see, it's a religious institution kind of a setup. So you have temple structures, and then you have what we know as gurukuls, where the teacher and the student live together. So they live together, they learn together, and it's an overall sort of learning. So that is what has been shown in Nalanda, and it is quite evident in the planning of that project as well. Now, if we talk about the built-up, it's quite minimal. It's the building, it's the road, that is it. If you talk about IIT as of now, you see a very dense amount of build-up with very little breathable spaces in between. And then we have roads, right? Even this road through which we have traveled today is not that much friendly at night in terms of safety. So why so? Why these exercises are not being done in terms of at planning level? If you are making a university, it should be a 24-hour safe university, at least for the students, because we have interaction. This primary road connects the outside to the inside of the university. So you have traffic from outside as well, and that creates a good amount of chaos. So I was sitting yesterday in the coffee shop in the main campus, and then we observed that although the spaces are demarcated as non-traffic zone, we still have influence of traffics around. You have delivery boys, you have other people who are coming in, who are not the permanent stakeholders of the space, but then they are engaging with the space, and our structures are not very much friendly with them. So that was the entire intent of the project, and we are trying to map these things and where it will go. So let's see.
Perfect. Fantastic.
Thanks. Yeah, so in the context of like bigger questions of safety, your intersection is this point of different groups using traffic systems. Okay, cool. So that's great. Anyone else want to share a little bit about the key intersection kind of change, shift point that they've noticed from doing this process?
I want to describe the project entirely. And I think what just talking about it in the broad ways, it gave us a lot more clarity. Like for example, yesterday we weren't able to come to a consensus. So like we slept on it, and we came to a linked idea, but not exactly that idea. I'm not discussing the specifics of it. I'm just talking of the process that we went through. And through that, and when we started this river, right? The second time around when we started the river, and then we really started to understand the metaphor and then figure out, okay, what is a roadblock? What do you do to clean a river? Like, what are the problems? What are the, when we say sources, so where does the source come from? For example, if we are talking, our issue is sort of, it's like softer abuse, like soft abuse in institutions, right? It's which could be snide comments, it could be biased assessment, it could be personal comments, it could be restricted access, or just ignoring the student or whatever, right? So these are soft abuse. So that is the area that we want to work on. Right now, we haven't reached a solution, right?
Yeah.
So today, what happened was this metaphor of the river. When we started it the second time round, it gave us a lot of clarity because when we thought of sources, we thought of okay, the whys. Where are these things coming from? So they became the tributaries. Okay, then where does the tributary come from? So tributary of, for example, social and cultural bias or upbringing comes from much deeper source. It comes from an aquifer maybe, right? Or from a inner well, right? Than let's say behavior, which is more surface. So that is just maybe just the rainwater thing that is feeding the rainwater fed tributary that is feeding the river, right? So just using a metaphor of a river gave us a lot of clarity into the reasons why we are in this project, the sources of it, the whys of it, and then what is the situation. For example, we have many. So the way we took our river was that it's not something that there's going to be a sharp change. So there's a situation, the situation are those verbal abuses, and they cause like the poor boats and the boats to capsize, the students to drown, etc. So, and then we realize that, for example, the one boat is on the corner, we will avoid the teacher altogether, right? So just using this metaphor helped us create, personas in our mind. This student is an absentee student because he doesn't like the teacher's comments at all. This one's boat is full of snide comments by the teacher and someday is going to drown, right? So we created personas through this metaphor of situation, right? And then when we went on to the river, we decided not to have, I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, right? You want to go on to the, so then we decided to go on to, we didn't want to make any sharp bend because this kind of intervention is not a sharp intervention, right? It's something that you have to go through the process. It's like a part of life. And it's like our source also reaches a very vast, our river doesn't start as narrow because it's there everywhere, it's part of life for everybody. So even the change is very gentle and narrow, so it's a very shallow, shallow kind of a bend because it is repetitive, it will change and it will, hopefully the interventions will be on the deeper aspects and we represented it by a dredging machine, or on more surface aspects by let's say a hyacinth collector, or not a mechanized intervention, which could be an institutional intervention, right? But maybe individual, like 3 people get together and pull a rope and remove the hyacinths, right? So that's a collective effort as well. And there's a collective watch also. As we spoke about situations and we realized that other educators need to keep a track of what other educators are doing as well, And it's not a silo, everybody has to be involved in it, which is why the interventions are not external, they're in the river, they're not outside the river. So I think actually using the river really helped us give a lot of clarity to our minds about this. And we are somewhere on the latter part, we are still working on, like even the interventions, we are not very clear about the interventions, but we did think of how how a good outcome would look like. So we don't want a destination because there's no end. The biases are not going to completely change. But we are hoping that the direction is good. Maybe the direction will come back and these biases will change, right? Or, well, it will flow happily. And some of the rocks will get smoothened over, some will get thrown out of the river, right? So everything is not going to change completely. So I mean that was our journey through this, and I think the river as a metaphor really helped us get a lot of clarity. And today I think now we're in a better position in ways.
Right. So that was fantastic. Great sort of description. I mean, essentially what you're describing there is sort of a prospective method for doing co-design. Yeah. And so the words you're using, the way you're using an analogous method to describe, you know, a process of change or a process of intervention or intersection. It's fantastic. So analogous methods are amazing, and we use them all the time in cultural practices. You know, we use them in our language. We use them as a way of diffusing situations or making humor and all of these sorts of things. But we also use them as ways of constructing a method of action. So I'm going to give you a quick task. I mean, you're going to keep working on this because I think this is a fantastic way for you to start to really think through what it is that you're doing and what the characteristics of the co-design project you might design might require. So being gentle and slow, you know, as opposed to a waterfall or something. So I just wanted to talk through this, and as soon as we're finished, we'll give you this thing. This is a method. It's quite a strange method, but it's a super, super useful method. I want you to sort of apply to some of these interventions. So the activity of dredging, yeah? So what is dredging in the context of your project? So there's a particular kind of theoretical construction by a long dead Russian called Lev Vygotsky, and anyone who's involved in education would probably know Vygotsky. So it's called Cultural Historical Activity Theory, or CHAT, and it's been applied in all sorts of kind of contexts within education and organisational psychology and so on. So there's a whole lot of it, but I'm just giving you a little tiny slice of it as a way of applying it to understanding the things you might do within a co-design process or a design process. So cultural historical activity theory is a way to analyse the ways in which human activity occurs through the interrelationships between people, things, places, and protocols. Yeah. So how does anything actually happen? Like we just did an activity and it was mediated by a whole lot of things. Yeah. So maybe we'll use this river of life as the activity that we'll do. It helps us see the cultural dimensions of any activity and the socio-cultural outcomes of that activity. So the things that kind of get inscribed into culture through an activity. So I'm going to explain the dimensions of this, but just it's quite simple. You'll get it quite quickly. But the task this afternoon is to think about, using this method, to think about one of the particular moments in your river where a co-design activity might occur, you know, with different stakeholders or particular stakeholders. You know, so for instance, in the context of the safer cycling on campus, maybe there's a series of different stakeholders that need to be engaged in the project. So you just pick out one or two or three or however many you want to do. And the idea is to go through this process, and it's essentially a way of you designing the co-design method you might deploy within your project at a particular moment, particular instance. Because the co-design process will have lots of moments, yeah? Particularly if you're trying to deal with something that's structural change, you know, like microaggressions within the educational context or something like that. Like it's a long project, you know, or diabetes, or this one was understanding concepts of normality and insensitivity towards difference, I guess. So within cultural historical activity theory, it's essentially a way of understanding an activity. So something is always the subject of activity. Yeah? So a bicycle is subjected to the activity of cycling, yeah? Or something like that. Or an animal is subject to the activity of farming or of hunting. Something. And so within that activity, there are a series of rules. So there's ways of doing it, yeah? And they're culturally determined rules. Yeah? There are particular tools that are used to mediate or undertake that activity. So in the instance of subjecting a bicycle to an activity, there's a bicycle, there's the road, there's, yeah, so and so on. There's a whole bunch of different sort of tools. And there are particular divisions of labour in an activity. So activities are very rarely individual activities. We either do things for other people or we do things with other people, or other people do things for us or to us. Yeah? So we can also be the subject of activity. And so the interaction between these things, tools, so things in the world, rules, ways, and divisions of labour of who does what and why become really, really important. That's a way of constituting activity. And the outcome or the object of the activity might be the utility, the utilitarian aspect of it. So what the objective is. But the objective isn't the outcome. The outcome is always a socio-cultural outcome of activity. And it either the tools, rules, divisions of labour work for whatever is subjected to activity, it meets the objective, and it reinscribes that activity culturally as the right way to do things, yeah? Or as the good way to do things. When things fall apart, like the tools don't work, or someone doesn't obey the rules, we start having problems. Different kind of cultural outcomes happen. So a way, just as a really quick example, because I'll leave you to sort of mull over this and think it through, and you don't need to get it right because there is no right, it's just a way of thinking. But an example I like to use is this idea of a Neolithic community. Yeah? So a community, pre-modern community, a hunting and gathering community. And so the men in that community, maybe, might subject a deer to the activity of hunting. So they're hunting a deer. And there'll be a series of rules. So there'll be different people that follow different rules. But there will be particular rules, like when to do it, what animal to hunt, what not to hunt, how far to stay back, and so on. There'll be particular tools, like the tools of hunting, so weapons, spears, and so on, but also maybe the landscape, yeah, the geology, the geography, how to move an animal. And there'll be particular divisions of labour. So different people in that hunting community might do different things, yeah? And the object of the activity might be to kill a deer, yeah, or to feed the community. Okay, so we've got a bit of a picture now of what might happen. So as a scenario for an activity when it all starts unravelling, yeah, because we'll start with the change state as opposed to the maintenance of the state. You might have a scenario where a deer is being subjected to the activity of hunting, and there are a series of different people, different levels of, say, maturity or cultural initiation within that community. And maybe some young hunter who isn't fully given the authority to be the person to kill the deer, kills the deer. And the person who has that authority, maybe the leader of that group, doesn't. So they may have met the objective. There's a dead deer and everyone can eat. But there's someone's in trouble and someone has lost status. Yeah. Yeah. So the cultural outcome of that activity has changed because there's been a breakdown in its divisions of labour. Yeah. Similarly, tools might fail. Yeah. And so new tools, there's a breakdown. And so new tools need to be made, new activities need to be produced and so on. So it's a way of sort of thinking through what might happen Yeah? So what happens, I'm just looking at this one because I caught my eye, but what happens where a role-playing process is a form of dredging, yeah? It's pulling up, surfacing things. What are the tools for that? What are the rules? What will that lead to? Yeah? So I think you probably all do this naturally anyway, but this is just a theoretical model for you to start to apply. So this afternoon, what would be great, as you think through your river of life, start to pull in on some of these key moments and use this process. You don't have to do it perfectly, but it's a way of thinking through what is the social cultural outcome. Because presumably along this river of the life, you want to make changes throughout the river. Yeah? You don't want it all to change at the end. You want people to come with you. And a co-design process is like that. You need people to, they're slow processes, co-design. Does that make sense? Yep. Any questions?
But does it follow after the preferred future has been thought about?
I think so, yeah. I think you need to have some goal image of your preferred future. Now, it may change. You may end up with a different future. But we do need something to work towards. Yeah.
And also here, is there a scope of including environment in this one?
Yes, well, this
or
is
it part of rules?
It's probably part of rules and tools, but I guess we just think of this as the context in which activity occurs. Yeah. I mean, it's Vygotsky, so he was interested in psychology more than environment.
Ecology.
But yeah, it could be expanded. Yeah, on the person, yeah.
So we can interpret it our way.
Absolutely, yeah, you can make your own model, yeah.
I think environment anyway comes because when you talk of social cultural outcomes, you are talking of the environment which you will reach to, right? So it's not an individual change. You're talking
I
about
wouldn't
environment.
agree. By default, it is not necessary that you do think about environment.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just picking up that point that we can use that to bring the environment.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can take this and you can make your own theoretical construct. What happens in co-design processes is that you have to tailor your methods to the context that you're working in. Yeah? So think of that as this. Yeah? You have to make new ways of doing design because the context is different, the people are different. Yeah. Amazing. All right, we need to clean up and get out of here because I imagine that other people potentially going to use it. Chari's here. So same again today, go away, find somewhere cool to sit, think about your river of life, thinking about some of your key moments.